In October 1988, in the quiet woods of Perry Township, Pennsylvania, the body of a young woman was discovered. Her name was Anna Kane. She was 26 years old, a mother, a daughter, and a woman whose life ended far too soon. That autumn morning, a passerby walking along the Ontolani Trail near Reading found her lifeless body. Around her neck was baling twine, tied tightly, marking the brutality of her final moments. Investigators quickly determined that she hadn't died where she was found. She had been strangled elsewhere and left in the woods. The small town was shaken, but after initial questioning and evidence collection, the case went cold. Detectives gathered what they could: her clothing, the twine, and DNA traces they hoped might one day reveal the truth.
But in 1988, DNA analysis was still in its early stages, and justice for Anna seemed far away. 15 months after her death, in February 1990, the Reading Eagle newspaper ran a front-page story asking for any leads on Anna's murder. Not long after, the newsroom received something unexpected: an anonymous letter from someone claiming to be a concerned citizen. The letter described details that only the killer could have known: where Anna's body was left, how her clothes were arranged, and the manner in which she was strangled. Police immediately suspected that whoever had written that letter was the very person who killed her. But the writer had left more than words behind. When the envelope was sealed, saliva had been used to close it, leaving behind DNA. Investigators compared the saliva on the envelope with DNA found on Anna's clothing, and it matched. The killer had unknowingly revealed himself, just not by name. For decades, that DNA sat in evidence storage, waiting for a technological breakthrough that could turn it into a name. Meanwhile, Anna's daughter, Tamika Reyes, grew up with a void that could never be filled. She was only 9 years old when her mother was killed. Overnight, her life changed. Her brothers went to live with their father, while Tamika was taken in by her aunt. She remembers her mother as bright and full of energy, a woman who loved to laugh, dance, and live without fear. Tamika often recalls moments walking hand in hand with her mother, stopping suddenly in a store as Anna started to dance to whatever music was playing. That memory stayed with her for decades, a reminder of the warmth she lost far too soon.
But for much of her childhood, the public image of her mother was painful to witness. Because Anna had been unemployed and struggling with addiction and prostitution at the time of her death, media coverage in 1988 was cruel and judgmental. Headlines painted her as a slain prostitute, implying she somehow deserved her fate. Tamika has spoken about how that portrayal haunted her. "She was more than that," she said. "She was a victim. She was a mother. She was loved." Growing up, Tamika felt her mother was being forgotten, her humanity erased by the way society viewed women like her. And without answers, her grief never healed. For years, detectives revisited the case when new technology emerged, but each time the DNA sample led nowhere. Scott Grimm's name never appeared in any criminal database because he had never been arrested for a crime requiring DNA submission. The case remained frozen in time, a file among hundreds of cold cases gathering dust. Yet the evidence was carefully preserved. The detectives who worked the original scene in 1988 treated every piece of evidence as precious, believing that one day science might catch up. They couldn't have known that more than 3 decades later, that careful preservation would make all the difference. By 2022, technology had advanced beyond what anyone in the late 80s could have imagined. Genetic genealogy, a method combining DNA evidence and family tree research, had become one of the most powerful tools in modern criminal investigations. Using public databases filled with DNA from millions of people who sent saliva samples to companies like 23andMe and Ancestry, genealogists could now identify relatives of unknown suspects even distant ones, and build family trees leading back to the individual who committed the crime. In Anna Kane's case, investigators took the unknown male DNA found on her clothing and the envelope and submitted it for genealogical comparison. When the results came back, the data pointed toward a family line in the Hamburg, Pennsylvania area. By tracing that line carefully, researchers narrowed the possibilities until one name emerged: Scott Grimm. He had lived locally for most of his life, not far from where Anna's body was found. He was never on police radar because he had no criminal record. But when investigators obtained a fresh DNA sample connected to Grimm through a search warrant, the results confirmed it beyond doubt. The DNA from the letter, the DNA on Anna Kane's clothing, and the DNA from Scott Grimm all matched perfectly. The man who had taunted police with his anonymous letter was the same man who killed Anna Kane. After 34 years, detectives had finally found the truth.
Yet the discovery was bittersweet. Grimm had died 4 years earlier, in 2018, of natural causes. He would never face justice. When Tamika received the call from investigators, she said she felt every emotion at once: relief, sadness, anger, and disbelief. After years of wondering, she finally had a name, a face. But knowing her mother's killer was already gone meant there would be no confrontation, no accountability, no justice served in court. "I was happy to finally put a face behind the monster who took her from us," Tamika said, and upset that he will never be able to face consequences. She also thought of her grandmother, who had passed away without ever knowing the truth. For her family, it was a long-awaited answer that came too late. Pennsylvania State Police investigators said they still don't know whether Anna and Grimm knew each other. Because Anna was reportedly meeting clients as a sex worker at the time, detectives believe she might have met Grimm that way, but nothing definitive has been proven. The letter Grimm sent to the Reading Eagle in 1990 remains sealed by police. They only disclosed that it contained intimate details about the crime scene, proving he had been there. Investigators say they will continue to check other unsolved cases to see if Grimm's DNA appears elsewhere, hoping to determine whether he might have been involved in additional crimes. In their news conference, Trooper Daniel Womer and Sergeant Nathan Trait credited the success of this case to the foresight of earlier investigators who preserved the evidence so carefully. "All of that stuff was preserved the way it should be," Trait said, because they knew that somewhere down the line, whatever they collected could be that little piece of evidence to solve the case. And here we are. That little piece of evidence was exactly what we needed. For Tamika, the resolution brings both comfort and renewed sorrow. The discovery doesn't erase decades of pain, but it does close the question that haunted her childhood. She says she still thinks of her mother every single day. "It's been hard growing up without a mom," she said. "No child should ever have to grow up without their mom." Even with the truth uncovered, Tamika still wonders why. Why her mother? Why that night? Why a man like Scott Grimm felt the need to take a life? Those questions will never be answered. Yet, in another way, Anna Kane's story is no longer just about tragedy. It's about persistence, the determination of detectives who refused to give up, the evolution of science that brought justice from a sealed envelope, and the strength of a daughter who kept her mother's memory alive for more than 30 decades. In 1988, Anna Kane's life was taken in silence. In 1990, her killer tried to speak again through an anonymous letter, taunting those searching for him. And in 2022, his own DNA, the same DNA that sealed that letter, finally spoke louder than his lies. It told the truth. More than 30 decades after her death, Anna Kane's name is remembered not just as another statistic or forgotten case, but as a symbol of how love, memory, and modern science can bring light to even the darkest corners of the past.